Congratulations, Mrs. Chen. You're finally pregnant. I stared at Dr. Martinez across her mahogany desk, my hands trembling as I processed words I'd waited 3 years to hear. Then she continued, her voice gentle but confused. Though I have to say, given your husband's test results, this is medically impossible. The room went silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and my heart pounding in my ears. What do you mean impossible? My voice came out as a whisper. Dr. Martinez frowned, flipping through David's file with manicured fingers. Your husband's sperm count is 0. Complete azoospermia. According to these labs from 6 months ago, he's been sterile since his vasectomy. Vasectomy? The word hit me like a physical blow, reverberating through my chest. There must be a mistake, I said, even as my medical training kicked in, analyzing the implications with clinical precision. David never had a vasectomy. Dr. Martinez's expression shifted from confusion to concern as she pulled up David's complete medical history on her computer screen. Her dark eyes widened as she scrolled through the records. Mrs. Chen, I'm looking at surgical records from University Hospital dated 4 years ago. Your husband underwent an elective vasectomy 2 years before you were married. The examination room began to tilt. The sterile white walls seemed to close in around me. 4 years ago, I'd been planning our wedding, talking about the children we'd have together, choosing baby names during late-night conversations, while David was surgically ensuring we never would.
My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm 33 years old, a reproductive endocrinologist who has spent the last decade helping couples navigate fertility challenges at Phoenix Women's Hospital. The crushing irony wasn't lost on me that I had been living my own nightmare while the man I trusted most watched me blame myself for problems he created. What I didn't know during that devastating consultation was that David had been orchestrating every moment of my suffering while planning to abandon me once my inheritance money was exhausted. What I would soon discover was that my husband's betrayal went far deeper than medical deception. He'd been systematically destroying my emotional and financial well-being while building a secret life with another woman. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning to show you exactly how a man can spend 3 years watching his wife inject hormones that made her violently ill, undergo invasive procedures that left her bleeding and broken, and blame herself for infertility he caused, all while planning his calculated escape. 3 days before that life-changing appointment with Dr. Martinez, I was reviewing patient files in my home office when David's iPhone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The sound cut through the quiet of our suburban house like a knife. He was upstairs in our master bathroom shower, and normally I wouldn't look at his messages, but something about the sender's name caught my attention. Dr. Stevens, Urology Associates.
The message was brief, but devastating. Vasectomy reversal consultation scheduled for next month. As discussed, timing is crucial for your situation. My hands shook violently as I screenshot the message with my own phone. Vasectomy reversal? David had never mentioned any urological issues, much less previous surgery. In 3 years of fertility treatments at the most prestigious clinic in Phoenix, he'd never disclosed any relevant medical history to our doctors or to me. That night, lying beside my husband in our king-sized bed while he slept peacefully, I made a decision that would change everything. Using my hospital credentials and our shared insurance portal access, I began investigating David's complete medical records. What I found in the glowing laptop screen made me physically sick. The vasectomy records were all there, dated 18 months before our wedding. But there was more.
Consultation notes with Henderson and Associates divorce attorneys from 8 months ago, discussing optimal timing for asset protection during dissolution of marriage with high-earning spouse. The timeline was chilling in its precision. David had been planning to leave me once my inheritance money from my grandmother's estate was depleted by fertility treatments he knew were pointless from day one.
I spent the rest of that sleepless night documenting everything. My medical training guiding me through the evidence like a complex case study. Bank records showed my $150,000 inheritance funds steadily draining toward fertility treatments, while David's personal savings account had grown by $23,000. Email archives revealed conversations with someone named Jennifer Martinez about starting fresh once his complicated situation was resolved. The most devastating email, dated just 2 weeks earlier, read, "Can't wait to start our real life together once this charade is over. My wife is so obsessed with getting pregnant that she doesn't see what's coming." By dawn, sitting in my home office, surrounded by printed emails, bank statements, and medical records, I had assembled a comprehensive dossier that would destroy the man who'd spent 3 years systematically destroying me. The confrontation came the next evening. David walked into our dining room, expecting his usual weeknight dinner, to find me sitting calmly at our antique oak table, a manila folder positioned precisely in front of me like a legal brief. "We need to discuss your vasectomy," I said, my voice clinically detached in the way I'd learned to deliver devastating news to patients. The color drained from David's face instantly. His briefcase slipped from his fingers, hitting our hardwood floor with a thud that echoed through the house. He sank into the chair across from me, staring at the folder like it contained his death warrant. "Sarah, I can explain."
"Can you?" I opened the folder with deliberate precision, revealing the first document. "Can you explain why you've watched me undergo 3 years of invasive fertility treatments while knowing you were surgically sterile?" David's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. I slid the divorce attorney's retainer agreement across the polished table surface. "Oh, or perhaps you can explain your 8-month plan to leave me once my inheritance money was exhausted?" His shoulders sagged in defeat, his expensive suit suddenly looking too large for his frame. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen, David?" My voice remained steady, professional, though inside I was screaming. "Were you planning to tell me before or after you moved in with Jennifer?" His head snapped up, green eyes wide with shock. "How do you know about your affair partner? The woman you've been promising a fresh start with once you're free of your complicated situation?" I pulled out printed emails, photographs from social media, credit card statements showing expensive dinners at the Capitol Grill charged to our joint account while he claimed we couldn't afford the next round of IVF. David crumbled completely, his face falling into his hands. "I never meant to hurt you this badly." "You watched me inject hormones that made me so sick I couldn't work for days. You held my hand through egg retrievals that were physically agonizing and emotionally devastating. You let me blame myself for problems you created." My voice finally cracked, revealing the pain beneath my professional composure. "You didn't accidentally hurt me, David. You systematically tortured me while planning your escape." That night, After David had retreated to our guest bedroom with his tail between his legs, I made a call that would define the next phase of my life. Patricia, this is Sarah Chen. I need to discuss potential legal action against my husband for medical fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and systematic financial deception. Patricia Valdez answered on the first ring, despite the late hour. A sharp-eyed family attorney with silver hair and a reputation for taking on complex fraud cases, Patricia had handled my grandmother's estate and knew exactly how much money David had helped me spend on pointless treatments. "Sarah, honey, what happened?" Her voice carried genuine concern mixed with professional alertness. After I explained the situation, Patricia's tone shifted to pure legal predator. "Can you be in my office at 8 tomorrow morning and bring everything you've documented?"
The next morning, sitting across from Patricia in her corner office that overlooked downtown Phoenix, I watched her review my evidence with the methodical precision of a surgeon. Her office was intimidating by design. Floor-to-ceiling law books, framed victories against major corporations, and a view of the courthouse where she destroyed countless opponents. In 25 years of practice, I've never seen spousal deception this calculated, Patricia said, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied bank statements. He didn't just lie. He orchestrated your medical treatment to maximize your emotional and financial damage before abandoning you. The medical malpractice angle was particularly compelling. By hiding his vasectomy, David had caused our reproductive health associates to focus entirely on female factor infertility, leading to unnecessary procedures and treatments that put my health at risk. We can pursue fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy, and possibly criminal charges for medical deception, Patricia explained, her fingers steepled as she calculated legal strategy. The evidence is overwhelming. Your medical training actually helps here. You documented everything perfectly. Dr. Elena Martinez, my own reproductive endocrinologist, and someone I'd considered almost a friend after 3 years of failed treatments, was furious when I explained David's deception during my follow-up appointment the next day.
"This is unconscionable," she said, her usually calm demeanor replaced by professional outrage. Her small frame seemed to vibrate with anger as she paced her office. "By withholding critical medical history, your husband caused 3 years of inappropriate treatment protocols and unnecessary physical risks to your health." Dr. Martinez explained that, had she known about David's vasectomy, our entire treatment approach would have been different. Instead of subjecting me to hormone treatments, egg retrievals, and embryo transfers, we would have immediately discussed sperm donation or adoption. "Every procedure you underwent was medically unnecessary," she said, shaking her head. "The emotional trauma, the physical side effects, the financial cost, all of it could have been avoided with basic honesty about his medical history." Her willingness to testify as an expert witness about David's deception and its medical consequences added crucial weight to my legal case. The lawsuit I filed 2 weeks later was comprehensive and devastating. I sought $400,000 in compensatory damages, $78,000 for unnecessary medical treatments, $200,000 for emotional distress, and $122,000 for lost career opportunities during my fertility struggle when I'd reduced my patient load to accommodate treatment schedules. But money wasn't my primary objective. I wanted public accountability, professional consequences, and legal assurance that David could never manipulate another woman the way he'd manipulated me.
The legal papers were served at David's accounting firm, Morrison and Associates, during a partners' meeting, ensuring his colleagues witnessed the sheriff's deputy handing him documents that detailed his systematic deception and planned abandonment of my wife. I'd specifically requested service during business hours at his workplace. Let his colleagues see exactly what kind of man they'd been working with for 5 years. His initial response was predictable. Denial, minimization, desperate attempts to paint me as a vindictive ex-wife seeking revenge. His hastily hired attorney, Robert Kim, from a budget legal clinic, argued that marital disputes shouldn't be litigated in civil court. Then, Patricia played our ace, the recorded confession where David admitted to planning our divorce to maximize his financial benefit while exhausting my inheritance on treatments he knew were pointless. I'd secretly recorded our confrontation conversation on my phone, which was completely legal in Arizona's one-party consent state. David's own words admitting to his systematic deception and calculated timeline became the centerpiece of our case. The case gained unexpected momentum when Reproductive Health Associates decided to join as an interested party. Dr. Martinez's testimony about the unnecessary treatments David's deception had caused added professional weight to my personal trauma.
This represents a fundamental violation of medical ethics, Dr. Martinez stated during her deposition, her voice firm with professional authority. Mr. Chen's deliberate concealment of relevant medical history caused us to subject his wife to inappropriate protocols with significant physical and psychological risks. The clinic was also concerned about potential malpractice liability from David's deception. If other patients discovered that partner dishonesty could lead to inappropriate treatment, their reputation and financial exposure could be significant. During the discovery phase, Patricia's team uncovered even more damaging evidence. David's internet search history, subpoenaed from his workplace computer, revealed months of research on hiding assets before divorce, minimizing alimony payments, and optimal timing for leaving high-earning spouse. His credit card statements told an even more damning story. While claiming we couldn't afford another round of IVF, David had been spending lavishly on dinners with both his divorce attorney and Jennifer, charging everything to our joint account that I rarely monitored. The most shocking revelation came from his personal Gmail account, which we accessed through a forgotten password linked to our shared computer. David had been corresponding with Jennifer Martinez, a 28-year-old marketing coordinator at his firm, for over 18 months, discussing their future together once his wife's obsession with pregnancy exhausted her inheritance.
She's so focused on getting pregnant that she doesn't see what's coming, David had written in one email. Once her grandmother's money runs out, I'll file for separation and we can start our real life together. No more pretending I want kids. Jennifer's responses revealed her full knowledge of his deception and timeline. I can't wait to be with someone who actually wants children instead of pretending to want them like you've been doing. How much longer do you think her money will last? The email thread documented not just David's infidelity, but his calculated timeline for financial exploitation, followed by strategic abandonment. Jennifer had been his willing accomplice, encouraging his deception and eagerly awaiting its conclusion. Patricia presented this devastating evidence to David's overwhelmed attorney with surgical precision. Your client has committed systematic fraud, subjected my client to unnecessary medical procedures while knowing they were pointless, conducted an affair with a coworker while pretending to work on their marriage, and planned to abandon her once her inheritance was depleted. We're prepared to make all of this public at trial. The settlement negotiation took place in Patricia's conference room. David looking like a condemned man who'd finally grasped the full scope of his consequences. His attorney, clearly uncomfortable defending the indefensible and realizing the case was unwinnable, strongly recommended accepting our terms.
Robert Kim's budget legal clinic wasn't equipped for complex fraud litigation, and David couldn't afford better representation after spending months paying divorce attorney consultation fees and financing his affair. The final settlement exceeded even our enhanced demands: $450,000 in total damages, plus David's agreement to pay all my future therapy costs related to his deception. The payment schedule required him to liquidate his retirement accounts and take a second mortgage on our house. More satisfying than the money was the public accountability component. David was required to send detailed confession letters to our fertility clinic, our mutual friends, his workplace, and Jennifer, explaining that our infertility had been caused by his hidden vasectomy and deliberate deception. The letter he was required to send to reproductive health associates read, "I deliberately concealed my vasectomy from my wife and your medical team, causing 3 years of inappropriate fertility treatments and unnecessary trauma to my wife. I take full responsibility for this medical deception and the physical and emotional complications it caused." His workplace letter was equally damning. "I have systematically deceived my wife about my fertility status while conducting an affair with a coworker. This deception led to unnecessary medical treatments and significant financial harm to my spouse. I am resigning my position effective immediately."
Morrison and Associates, David's conservative accounting firm that valued client trust above all else, didn't wait for his resignation. They terminated him within hours of receiving his confession letter, citing violation of professional ethics and moral turpitude clauses in his partnership agreement. Jennifer's reaction to her mandated confession letter was swift and brutal. She ended their relationship immediately upon receiving the detailed account of David's systematic deception and manipulation. More importantly, she contacted me directly, apologizing for her role and expressing genuine horror at learning the full extent of his betrayal. "I thought you were obsessed with having children, and he was the victim of an unreasonable wife who wouldn't accept reality," Jennifer told me during a surprisingly civil phone conversation. Her voice was shaky with emotion. "Learning that he deliberately caused your fertility problems and planned to abandon you once your money was gone, I realized what kind of person I'd been involved with." Jennifer's reversal was complete. She not only ended their relationship, but voluntarily provided Patricia with additional evidence of David's deception, including text messages where he'd bragged about manipulating me, and timeline discussions about when to pull the trigger on divorce proceedings. The ripple effects continued for months. David's reputation in our social circle was completely destroyed as friends received his confession letters and learned about his systematic deception. His professional network abandoned him after the accounting firm's termination became known throughout Phoenix's business community. Within 6 months of the settlement, David had been forced to move into a studio apartment, take a low-level bookkeeping job at half his previous salary, and begin making monthly settlement payments that consumed most of his income. The transformation in my own life was equally dramatic, but infinitely more positive. 6 months after the settlement, I made a career decision that turned my personal trauma into professional purpose. I left my position at Phoenix Women's Hospital to establish the Sarah Chen Center for Reproductive Honesty, dedicated to preventing fertility fraud and ensuring complete transparency in reproductive medicine. The center occupied a beautiful, converted Victorian house in Phoenix's medical district, with comfortable consultation rooms designed to feel more like living spaces than sterile medical offices. My vision was creating an environment where couples could have difficult conversations about reproductive honesty without the clinical coldness of traditional fertility clinics. My first major initiative was developing the Chen protocol, comprehensive screening procedures that required separate consultations with each partner
independent medical record verification from previous providers, and signed legal acknowledgments that withholding relevant reproductive information constituted actionable fraud. The protocol also included psychological evaluations to identify potential deception, financial counseling to prevent exploitation of inheritance or savings, and legal consultation to ensure both partners understood the consequences of reproductive dishonesty.
The center's mission statement reflected everything I'd learned from my devastating experience. Every person deserves honest, ethical reproductive care and complete transparency from their healthcare providers and partners when making family planning decisions. Reproductive deception is reproductive abuse. Dr. Martinez became one of my strongest advocates, referring patients from reproductive health associates who needed specialized counseling for potential partner deception or complex reproductive challenges involving trust issues. Sarah's experience taught our entire field to be more vigilant about partner honesty in fertility treatment, she said during a medical conference where I presented our new transparency protocols. Her center is preventing other women from experiencing the same systematic betrayal she survived. The work was deeply fulfilling in ways my previous hospital research position had never been. Every couple I helped navigate honest conversations about fertility, every case of potential partner deception I identified and addressed felt like justice for the woman I'd been, the reproductive endocrinologist who'd been deceived by the very kind of medical dishonesty she helped other patients navigate. Within the first year, we'd identified and prevented 12 cases of partner deception similar to David's systematic fraud. Men who'd hidden vasectomies, women who'd concealed hysterectomies, partners who'd lied about genetic conditions or previous fertility treatments. Each prevented betrayal felt like a victory against the kind of reproductive manipulation I'd endured.
A year after establishing the center, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine invited me to keynote their annual conference on ethics in fertility treatment. Standing at the podium before over 2,000 fertility specialists worldwide, I delivered a presentation titled When Partners Deceive: Systematic Approaches to Preventing Reproductive Fraud. The speech received a standing ovation, but more importantly, it led to widespread adoption of enhanced transparency protocols at fertility clinics across the country. Medical schools began incorporating our case study into ethics curricula, using David's deception as a teaching example of how partner dishonesty could undermine patient care and professional liability. During the conference Q&A session, a physician from Seattle asked about long-term outcomes for women who'd experienced reproductive fraud. My answer came from hard-won wisdom. Recovery isn't about forgetting the betrayal or minimizing its impact. It's about transforming that experience into protection for others and advocacy for systematic change in how we approach reproductive honesty. 2 years after the settlement, my center had expanded to 3 locations across Arizona and helped over 300 couples navigate fertility challenges with complete transparency. More importantly, we'd identified and prevented 28 cases of partner deception, saving those women from the kind of systematic betrayal and financial exploitation I'd endured. Each prevented case represented not just individual protection, but systematic change in how the medical community approach reproductive honesty. Our protocols had been adopted by fertility clinics in 12 states, creating a network of transparency that made David-style deception increasingly difficult to perpetrate.
David's attempts to rebuild his life had been consistently thwarted by the permanent consequences of his public accountability requirements. The mandated confession letters had created a searchable online record of his systematic deception that followed him through job interviews, credit applications, and new relationships. His LinkedIn profile had been updated to reflect his employment termination due to violation of professional ethics, making it nearly impossible to find work in accounting or financial services. The few jobs he'd managed to secure had ended quickly when employers discovered his history through routine background checks. According to mutual acquaintances who occasionally provided updates, David had been forced to move back in with his elderly parents after being unable to afford even his studio apartment rent. His dating attempts had been similarly disastrous, with several women sharing screenshots of his dating profiles in local Facebook groups, warning others about his history of reproductive deception and systematic deception. The requirement that he disclose his history of reproductive deception to any serious romantic partner proved to be an ongoing consequence he'd never anticipated when planning his fresh start with Jennifer.
At 35, I'd found something I never expected after David's betrayal. A sense of purpose that went beyond personal healing to systematic protection of other women from similar manipulation. The trauma he'd inflicted had been transformed into a calling that prevented hundreds of other women from experiencing the same systematic betrayal. My personal life had slowly begun to heal as well. I was in a committed relationship with Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a pediatric surgeon who understood both my career demands and my need to process past trauma at my own pace. I don't need to compete with your past or fix what your ex-husband broke, Michael had told me early in our relationship, his dark eyes serious as we talked in his downtown loft. I just need to love you as you are now. Stronger, wiser, and committed to helping others avoid similar betrayal. The empty nursery in my house, once a painful reminder of dreams destroyed by David's deception, had been converted into a home office where I wrote research papers on reproductive ethics and developed new patient education materials. The space that had once represented failed hopes now housed work that prevented other women's dreams from being similarly sabotaged. During quiet evenings reviewing case files and developing new transparency protocols, I sometimes wondered what my life might have been like if David had been honest about his vasectomy from the beginning. Would we have pursued adoption immediately? Would I have ended our relationship and married someone who genuinely wanted children? Those questions no longer carried the sharp, devastating pain they once had. They felt like idle curiosity about an alternate timeline that was ultimately irrelevant to the meaningful, purposeful life I'd built from the ashes of his systematic betrayal. David had calculated that his deception would give him financial advantage and the freedom to start fresh with Jennifer once my inheritance was exhausted. Instead, his betrayal had given me a calling that mattered on a national scale, a reputation built on integrity rather than manipulation, and the deep satisfaction of knowing his cruelty had become hundreds of other women's protection. 3 years after that devastating conversation in Dr. Martinez's office, I received a recognition that would have been impossible during my years of unexplained infertility. The American Medical Association honored the Sarah Chen Center with their Ethics in Practice Award for our groundbreaking work preventing reproductive fraud and promoting transparency in fertility care. Standing at the podium in the Chicago Convention Center, accepting the award before thousands of medical professionals, I thought about the woman I'd been at 33, desperate to get pregnant, blaming herself for fertility issues that were entirely fabricated, watching her husband pretend to support her while systematically planning her financial and emotional destruction. She deserved to know that her pain wouldn't be wasted, that her experience would become the foundation for protecting hundreds of other women, and that sometimes the deepest, most calculated betrayals become the catalyst for the most meaningful and lasting victories. The center's mission statement, framed in gold behind my desk, captured everything I'd learned through surviving David's systematic deception. Truth in reproduction, honesty in partnership, healing through helping others prevent similar trauma. David had written a story where his calculated medical fraud and financial exploitation would end with his comfortable escape and my complete devastation. Instead, it had become the opening chapter of something infinitely more powerful, a career dedicated to ensuring no other woman would suffer the particular kind of systematic reproductive betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. And for the first time since discovering his vasectomy in that sterile examination room 3 years ago, that felt like exactly the ending I would choose. Not the one I'd originally planned, but the one that ultimately mattered most.